Welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. The topic for today is the latest Blue Note release in the Tone Poet series of Anthony Williams' Lifetime. Really excited about this release. Happen to have a mono original on hand, so I'm going to do a little bit of a comparison with that, talk about some of the differences, and just generally what I think about this title. Also, I'll give you a little bit of a channel update. There's just been a lot going on in terms of other titles coming in and my turntable quest. Variety of things. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. But first, as always, hit like, hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and head over to Instagram. You can follow me at what_can_brown. All right, so really quick, that channel update. So a couple of things that I wanted to address. One is that a lot of my videos lately have been about some of these Record Store Day preview kind of videos that, you know, I really hope are going to be helpful for folks who are interested in, I guess, knowing a little bit more about what you get into with, with some of these Record Store Day releases, because there's a lot of hype going into it, and there's almost like this mad grab on the day, and I kind of always want to make sure that what I'm grabbing is going to be something I want to listen to more than once, I have to be honest. And so, anyway, I'm hoping that some of those videos were helpful for somebody, and you know, you can go back in my in my recent videos and you can check out some of those, because I did like individual videos for a bunch of titles, and then I also did like one video that kind of covered everything that's coming out this coming, well, Saturday, right? April 20th for Record Store Day. So maybe I'll see some of you out there if anybody's in Atlanta. So outside of that, one of the things that I've been doing that I've been talking about on this channel is I've been auctioning off just a ton of records, right? So I think, 400 records now that I'm through auctioning on eBay, like one at a time, listing them individually. And it's gone really, really well. I have to be honest, it's been very therapeutic for me to get rid of these records that are either duplicates or that I just don't listen to anymore. And financially, it's been great as well. And I think everybody knows that pays attention to this channel what I was going to do with some of the proceeds. Initially, I thought all the proceeds was buy a turntable, and I did. I bought a turntable. I bought it yesterday, and I spent more than I thought I was going to. I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but here's the thing: is that I bought it yesterday, but I'm waiting for the cartridges to get like they had to order them, and they had to order a separate head shell. I'm going to get into it in a different video, but because I don't have it to show you, I don't want to talk about it yet. But I'm going to make a video that talks about my considerations, the different turntables that I was looking at and considering, and why I ended up going with the one that I did. So that's coming up very soon. And then the last thing is that, like I said, this has been a busy week for just arrivals. So not only did I get Anthony Williams' Lifetime, a couple of non-jazz releases. Very strange for me to get non-jazz releases. Jim White's Drill a Hole in That Substrate and Tell Me What You See, I think is the full name of the album. This is on Luaka Bop. I'm a big Jim White fan. He's like a local, well, he's from Pensacola, but he lives in Atlanta, or actually he lives in Athens, but he's just a phenomenal sort of storyteller, songwriter. He's playing Eddie's Attic locally coming up next week, but I'm actually DJing a bar called Stereo, which is just like needle drop kind of stuff. I'm gonna be there for 4 hours on Wednesday night on like the 24th. So if anybody is in Atlanta and wants to check it out, you can do that. I'm putting together my set list. Anyway, Jim White, Drill a Hole in That Substrate and Tell Me What You See. You should go listen to it. Amy Mann actually guests on this one. Another one, Christopher Paul Stelling, also feels like a local musician. I'm not sure exactly if he's from Georgia, but this is his latest release. This is part of like a crowdfunded type of thing that I participated in, and so finally got the vinyl. Really excited about that. Those two are non-jazz. Very unusual for me. I also got this early. I got Owen Broder's Hodges Front and Center Volume 2. Trying to dig into that. I'm a member of VMP, right? Vinyl Me Please, and I was really excited that they chose Oliver Nelson with Eric Dolphy, straight ahead. Haven't even cracked the seal on that yet. And then the other one that I haven't cracked the seal on is Shabaka Hutchings, right? Perceive Its Beauty, Acknowledge Its Grace. This is the standard edition. There is a VMP double 45 RPM edition that's also coming out. And I forgot that I had already ordered this one, and I ordered that one too. So one of them is going to have to hit eBay once the other one comes in. So anyway, that's all the stuff that maybe you're not here for. What you're here for is Lifetime, right? So Anthony Williams' Lifetime, I happened to pick this up when I was visiting. Where was I? I was in Augusta. I was in Augusta, Georgia, like I guess about a week ago, and I stopped into Grant Ski Records, and the very friendly guys that own that shop told me about this. I knew that it was coming out. I wasn't really thinking about picking it up, and they were like, "You should listen to this because it's that good." And I'm very familiar with the album. I have a mono, and I was like, "Oh, I have an original mono. It's in nice shape. Like I don't know if I need it, but strong recommendation. I picked it up, and that is what I wanted to talk about today. So let's finally get into this. All right, Anthony Williams' Lifetime, same as Tony Williams, right? We all know this. So this is his debut album for Tony Williams. He only went by Anthony, I think, for this album and then for Spring, both for Blue Note, and then I think he switched permanently to Tony Williams. I think that's right. I think it's something like that. Anyway, recorded in 1964. Tony Williams was 19 years old when it was recorded. No, actually, I don't think he turned 19 yet. I think he was 18 years old when he recorded this. Now, at this point, he had already joined Miles Davis. He played on Seven Steps to Heaven the prior year, had not yet recorded ESP, but would, I guess, maybe like 6 months or so after this was recorded. So Tony Williams is already set up with Miles Davis, and that must have been one of the reasons why he was given the ability to make his own albums for Blue Note. So on this album, we have Sam Rivers, fantastic saxophonist, Bobby Hutcherson, Herbie Hancock, Gary Peacock, and Richard Davis. But also there's Ron Carter here, and it's really funny because if you look at the back, you will not see Ron Carter's name up here, and yet his name is on the cover, and he does play, I believe, on just one track. So, go figure, but phenomenal array of musicians in 1964 when some of these folks were putting out some of their most inspired work. So just a really, really exciting time period. Now, one thing I wanted to sort of clarify or bring up is that the album, well, it's titled Lifetime, but that was also a name that Tony Williams used as the name for his group. So he had it was called The Tony Williams Lifetime, and that was the name of the band that put out future titles that included like Emergency. What was that on Polydor? I forget what Emergency was on. But he put out Emergency, put out Turn It Over, and Ego. There's a number of ones. I think it was like 8 albums that he put out as the Tony Williams Lifetime. As like that band. And many of those, if not all, were fusion albums. Now, this is very much not a fusion album. So then what is it, right? So this is actually, if I were to classify it, and I know that labels are sometimes problematic, but if I was to classify it, I would call it avant-garde. I just would. It's not purely free jazz. These are compositions. So actually every single track on this is by Tony Williams. They're all original compositions. But what I would say about the music here is that there's not single sort of established rhythm on really any of the tracks. But it's also not completely free of rhythm either. I mean, let's be real, Tony Williams is a drummer. But in addition to it being sort of relatively free of at least a consistent rhythm, that's a better way of putting it, it's also free of chord progressions pretty typically. It's free of melody, so it's absent melody. And so I think that it's avant-garde, or I think, that you could say that it's experimental, but it's still composition-based music. In any event, there are plenty of extended sections in a variety of the tracks on this where there's just like one instrument or perhaps just a couple of the instruments that are like trading phrases or like even fully improvised runs. And it's just kind of, it feels kind of choppy. It's kind of sporadic in almost like a call and response kind of way, but still a lot of this is unplanned kind of music. So if that isn't for you, well, just know that that is what you're going to come across here. What I would say, my general recommendation with this type of music, even though I'm not a fan of like the, sort of the more experimental, free jazz type of stuff, I think that this music is best absorbed just kind of like sitting back and closing your eyes if it helps, and just kind of letting it like wash over you, because there is a lot of beauty here, even in the lack of, I guess what I'll just say, order. All right, so I said that I had an original mono to compare it to, and so that's what I want to do now, right? I want to get into a little bit of the music. I'm not going to do full-on track by track because there's actually probably an easier, more succinct way to sort of summarize some of my thoughts here. I want to start with the Tone Poet, though. So this is a stereo, right? So I guess what that means here is going to be kind of important, because right now it feels like there's a lot of folks who are in this, in the space, right? People who are buying these tone poets, and it's almost like it's almost become in vogue to talk about how, like, or complain about hard panning. Where people are like, I can't stand it. They're, John Coltrane's over here and everybody else is over here, that kind of thing. And here's the thing. I mean, that's just always been the case with so many stereo recordings, and yet it feels like lately people are almost like discovering it for the first time. So what I wanted to bring up here is that the sax is in the right channel, drums is in the left. And I would say that when the two are on the same track, or, roundabout in the same place, or certainly playing together, they're very much on equal footing. And so there is a little bit of a hard pan nature to it, and it does feel like sax and drums are sort of at the front of this record, at least when they are both playing. And so it is a little bit panned in feel, but I will say that the bass feels more central. I'd say left center, something like that. And I think having it a little bit in the center helps kind of ground the two and sort of fill in some of the space. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way that it makes sense to me. In terms of Tony Williams, right? So star of the show, it makes perfect sense that the drums would be so present in the mix, and it's just so audible and out front, right? Well, he sounds phenomenal here. So very crisp snare, very crisp cymbals. Just really, really well recorded, I think, is the best way to put it. Some of the best that I've heard on any recording for drum dynamics and detail, for sure. And I just think generally, though, that the drums sounded more present in the mix than I expected. But again, it's because he's a leader and he can do what he wants. It's the same way that, like, when Lee Morgan is a leader, you're going to hear more of him. Now, on the other hand, Sam Rivers, right, on saxophone, a lot of character and a lot of dynamics is as well. And I guess, like, character, that's like a weird way to put it, perhaps, without me explaining it. There's a lot of his own personality, I think, in his playing. And when you have such a great recording, you can hear all of that character, right, to his playing. If it wasn't well recorded, you'd be like, there's a tenor, but because it's him, you just hear a lot more detail. You can hear resonance. You can hear, like, the keys of the saxophone. You can hear the air that's being blown through it. And I guess that's what I'm getting at. There's a ton of detail for really all the musicians, but I would especially say drums and tenor. Now, in terms of the bass is important here, right? Because you have 3 bassists on this album, and I think a few of these tracks, in fact, I think the first, 2 or 3, you have multiple bassists. I think Richard Davis and Gary Peacock are both playing, and yet you'll get a little bit of a difference between the two, right? Because one will be playing, sort of more of a standard upright bass, and the other might be doing some bowing or some plucking, and some, lower tones kind of thing. And so there's a reason for having the multiple bassists. They're not just playing the same thing. But there's a lot of nuance with the bass here that's really nice. Very resonant. There's a lot of string noise here, so the noise of strings being plucked. And I just think overall that all the musicians sound really good, and I'd be it would be a travesty if I didn't bring up Herbie Hancock. So Herbie's here. He doesn't play as much as you might think that he would, but he sounds phenomenal as well. Just hearing the piano treated in this way is just really nice to hear. Like his touch on the piano, it's a very warm sound here whenever he plays, and it's amazing as well. So I think each of the musicians sound fantastic here. I didn't even bring up Bobby Hutcherson because I plan to talk about him on a couple of tracks coming up, but Bobby Hutcherson plays vibraphone and marimba here, and he also sounds fantastic. So I guess what else should I say about some of the sonic elements of this? Well, Tony Williams uses really nice crescendos, which is which means that the sound is getting louder, but it's something that he's controlling. And he uses some of those nice crescendos on the first track on side 2, which is Tomorrow Afternoon. Memory, which is the second track on side 2, opens with like a vibes and auxiliary percussion kind of duet almost. And I think that if there's anywhere on this album that's like the biggest treat for percussion fans, it's this. There's again, because it's auxiliary percussion, there's a lot of different things going on, and man, like the amount of detail and interest, it's really, really good. I feel like I'm not even bringing up Two Pieces of One, which is almost a suite that takes up the full first side, but it's phenomenal. The last track, Barb's Song to the Wizard, is more melodic, I would say, with Herbie Hancock having a heavier hand here alongside Ron Carter. One of the things that occurred to me when I listened to this track is that, well, I have a subwoofer in the room, and this track I thought was I can hear the subwoofer anyway throughout this, but here is where the sub really had the most like lift, I guess, to the music, just because there's like really low register bass notes that have this kind of like resonance that's just really, really nice. So just a couple of words about the original mono. And I will clarify that, this mono is like one of the cleanest records that I own in terms of a Blue Note record. I think that as much as on Instagram, I like to talk about how like no one really knows how often a record has been played, like how many times a record has been played. I just think that that's absurd. With any certainty to be able to say, oh, this is how many times, I think that's absurd. However, this is really, really clean, and I got it from a radio station collection that's a whole nother video that I've never made yet. I bought this like 900 piece vinyl collection from a radio station of like all these promos. I need to make a video about this at some point. But anyway, this was included in it. This is like 2020 when I got it. And what occurred to me when I pulled this out is that the record was still in the original 25-year sleeve. Now, I know that when I have a record such as this that's in an original, presumably dusty sleeve, the reason is because I haven't played it since I bought it. And the reason for that is I already had a copy of it that as soon as I got this copy, and I sold that one, so it's not that I've never listened to it, it's just I haven't listened to this one. And so when I pulled this out to do this comparison and I realized it was in that paper sleeve, I got kind of excited. I was like, oh my God, I've never heard this. Put it on, not a sound, like no, I mean, obviously there's music. There's no pops, there's no static. It was just silence, just beautiful, like quietness, and the mono sounds really, really good. Here's the thing, is that any way you look at it, this is a phenomenal recording. The biggest difference is going to be obvious. It's that it's mono and that the Tone Poet is stereo. Tone Poet is in stereo, right? So what I led with, that whole panning thing, well, that's not present here, right? So effectively you have sax and drums and all the other instruments that are basically in the center, that are just right in the center. It's a mono presentation. And so, how that affects the recording, or how that affects the listening experience, at least in this case, and because it's a vintage vintage pressing, is that I didn't feel like there were as good sustains or resonance or detail or even like air around the instruments as I got in the stereo. So the benefit is that you don't have the panning whatsoever, but maybe at the expense of some of the detail. So when you have all the instruments that are together and you don't get a sense of, again, like a stereo soundstage, the separation of instruments, you don't really get as much of that. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of amazing elements on this mono. Like the mono is fantastic. It sounds great. I just think that listening to the two together, it's very clear that there's not as much sonic detail. And like for example, some of the bowing work on the bass solos sound a little bit more abrupt because you don't get that kind of that trail, right, of sound. And I would say that because the drums are so prioritized in the mix, and that they're louder than maybe you'd expect on something else, and the crispness to the cymbals, it's almost like they become like instead of it adding like, I don't know, like instead of it being distinct and having there be like a lot of detail in the cymbals, what it does is that it almost covers some of the detail of the other instruments. It kind of like washes over that, if that makes sense. So, so there's some things that I suppose are lacking with the mono, only in comparison to the stereo. I wouldn't even be saying that there's anything wrong with the mono if I wasn't listening to the stereo. And Hutcherson, especially when he's alone, I think on that, that second track on side 2, where he's playing marimba, it still sounds phenomenal, especially when he's playing alone and there's nothing that sort of restricts the noise, right? This restricts the sound. You can still hear every little bit that he's playing. So I realize that I want to be bolder with what I want to say about this than what I've been rambling about a little bit over the last few minutes. So this is what I want to say. The mono recording of this does sound more of what you would expect from a classic Blue Note record. It fulfills that experience that you want. It's mono, and it has a beauty in and of itself. And keep in mind that I'm listening to this with a stereo cart, right? So this new turntable that I have coming in, I'm getting a dedicated mono cart, and so we'll see what happens. But here's the thing: playing it with the setup that I have, the Tone Poet has better soundstage, better separation of instruments, better clarity, better sonic detail, better sense of dynamics. And I said that I wanted to be bolder. I'm going to suggest that this is possibly the best sounding Tone Poet release in the entire series. Now, it isn't my favorite album that they've put out. I'm not saying that, although I love this music, I really do. I'm saying that it could be the best sounding release. And if not of the entire series, it's at least of the year and at least of recent memory. If you're an audiophile, if you love to hear great music recorded and presented as best as it can be, this is it. It's very in-room sense of it. It's very natural. It sounds like it was recorded yesterday. It really is. It's just incredible. So I am going to leave it at that. Phenomenal music. For all the reasons that I've stated probably multiple times. The only thing you have to know is again, it's a little bit more avant-garde. So don't think you're going to come into this and for like a soul jazz session, you're going to be tapping your foot. This is not that at all. And yet there's so much beauty to it. And so I think for even folks who are a little bit leery of the style, that, man, this is a phenomenal way to start trying to get into it, because there's so much. It's so rewarding anyway of a recording because of just how fantastic it sounds and how fantastic it was presented here. So that's my assessment of Lifetime, and I hope this is helpful. I'm really curious what other people think about this release, if they were as surprised about how it sounds. I shouldn't say surprised. Like, we know that Blue Note's going to churn out great stuff. It's just that I wasn't expecting it to sound like this. So anyway, that's it for now. Stay tuned for that turntable video. It's gonna be hard for me to put that one together because I'm not as much of an equipment guy. I've been learning as I've been going. But again, in I think less than a week's time, I'll have that turntable set up in the room, be able to spin stuff, and I'm just super excited. So stay tuned for that. Hope everybody has a great record store day. I'll see you next time.